Hey guys, and welcome to my first Q&A. Well, I hope it's going to be the first, and I hope it's not going to be the last, but you never know. YouTube is a fickle thing. Anyway, as part of the 100 subscriber giveaway, I said I was going to do a Q&A, and as part of the requirements to enter to win that wonderful £10 or equivalent gift voucher from Games Workshop, I said drop us a question, hobby related, and I'll see if I can answer it. And the first question comes from That Wargamer, who says, thank you for doing this, that's great, and he's liking the content, which is even better. And his question is, do I read any of the Black Library novels? And which one was my favourite? I have read a number of them, particularly the Horus Heresy series, but before that, a whole bunch of different ones. But the two of my favourites is from Horus Heresy is the Mechanicum book, mainly because it just didn't involve Space Marines shooting Space Marines, and it wasn't all around Civil War. It was more to do with the breakup of Mars and what was going on with there. It's my first real introduction about knights, and they were sort of patrolling around and doing their bits and pieces, and some of the inner workings of the Magos and all the weird and wonderful intricacies of the Mechanicum. So it's the first time we really got a good view of what was going on Mars during the major Civil War, really, and it just wasn't all about so and so. Chapter Master this and Primarch that. It was a bit more narrative, a bit more in depth, and just gave a wider picture of what was going on in that particular area. And as we know, the Mechanicum sort of split into the Dark Mechanicum. Horus had already sowed his seeds and said, "Come and work for me," or "Come and work for them," which is why the traitors ended up with slightly better armour. They got the first decent armour, whereas the loyalists were still rocking some old crap. And so that sort of led on to various bits and pieces. But the other good book is probably the Ravener series. Very Dr. Xavier, Professor Xavier, even. Sat in his wheelchair and doing lots of psychic trickery as part of the Inquisition series. That and the Eisenhorn series were pretty good, but I probably rated Ravener a little bit more highly. I thought it was a bit more fun, taking control of various people and all the rest of it to do his investigations for the Inquisition. It's been a long time. They're quite old books now. I don't even think they're for sale, but if you find them, then do give them a look up. So the second question then comes from White Shark Gaming, who is a long-term friend of mine. In fact, I am rocking his, I don't know if you can see that with the light, his White Shark Gaming coffee mug. Thank you very much. But yeah, I've known the guy behind that name for a long time. Good friend of mine, and will be featuring hopefully in a battle report not too long away. His question is, where do I get my inspiration from? What's my for painting? What's my setup like? That kind of thing. Inspiration for my armies comes from a number of different sources. Normally, it's model related. I hope I've never been a power gamer. I tend to, if I like a model, I'll run it. I do like Forge World models, which sometimes made me a little bit unpopular occasionally. But not because of the rules for those models. I bought them because I like the look of them. Probably the only one that I might argue the case with there is the Storm Eagle model, and then they produced rules for the Storm Eagle Rock, which had a better missile launcher on it, so I did change the model type. I can no longer do that, as it is now limited to the Minotaurs chapter, so it's going to have to go back to a regular Storm Eagle, much to my disappointment. But everything else is typically based around the model, how it looks, whether I think I can do a justifiable paint job on it. A lot of my collection has typically stemmed from attending campaign events at Games Workshop up at Warhammer World. So if there's a theme for a particular campaign, there's been Inquisitor themes, there's been Orc themes, Imperial Guard themes, and I've tended to build armies based around that. And if a bunch of guys that I've known for a long time said, what would be cool is if we took an entire task force, all of the same chapter or race or faction or whatever, and we all put them together and had a combined army, it would look really cool. So my Eandon Eldar spawned from that. That started as a combat patrol army, and then a 1500 point bolt-on, because the weekend involved combat patrol and 1500 point games, so you ended up with a 1900 point force. That I then enjoyed painting yellow, much to my dismay, it's now become a pain in my backside, but I do enjoy painting yellow. That's now an army that's probably around 7,000 points. Imperial Fist, that came from a campaign as well. Space Wolves, my Space Wolves army is a second version of that. I have my very first army was Space Wolves, mainly because I just like the look of the models, and that's what the store manager sold me at the time. They were second edition metal models. That army got sold when all the plastics came out, and then I replaced it all with new shiny plastics. That's pretty much it for inspiration behind the armies. It's normally rule of cool rather than rule of rules, and that tends to be what factors into my decision making. As for painting setup, I'm in a limbo at the moment. My new painting setup I'm promised will be ready for next weekend. But in the meantime, if I spin the camera around, this is my temporary setup in a spare bedroom. So what I'll do is I'll grab the camera. And as you can see here, this is my recording software going on there over there. Microphone here. There's a white plastic frame which is holding a light up there. It's actually a photography light. Then obviously the paints along the back with some drawers with Bright Etch and some Tamiya Clear, airbrush, some MIG pigment stuff in there, some knife blades in that one, there's some magnets in that one, some paintbrushes over here. But yeah, this is pretty much my temporary space. Now I'm not doing a huge amount of painting in this space, mainly because most of my painting tends to, let me just spin the camera around. There we go. Most of my painting tends to be airbrush to start with, like zenith highlights and so on, so when you hold it down at a 45-degree angle. And I can't really do that in this space because I need to be near the window, and as you can see from the camera, the window is all the way over there, which is no good. But when I'm in my new space, that will be an awful lot better. And I'll be doing a video as step by step, as I've, this room's been completely stripped. It's new floors, new decorating, new woodwork, new desk, new cupboard, the whole new storage. Everything's brand new in there. It's going to be great, and it's really going to help my painting. It's going to be better light and all the rest of it, all that good stuff. So inspiration will be forthcoming from a invigorated man cave. So I hope that answers your question, and we'll move on to the next one. So the next question comes from the real Gibraltar, as opposed to the fake one somewhere, and it's what's my favourite series of models? What's my favourite model from either a technical or other perspective? So from a normal perspective, I would probably say it was the new release of the Space Wolf plastics. So the one where you could build either Bloodclaws, Grey Hunters or Wolfguard out of the same box, and it came with all the options, all the special weapons, everything else. And I thought, for a value for money box set all in one, I thought that was tremendous. It gave all the options, all the different heads. So you could have this sort of the younger looking heads and paint those in sort of a bright orangey type hair to give them Bloodclaw looks, or you could paint them slightly a bit more dishevelled and make them Grey Hunters, or make them into the Wolfguard. I thought from a value perspective, I thought that was really good. It gave everything you actually needed, and I thought from just that single box set, I thought was really good. So that was probably my favourite of those. But from a technical challenge, probably the Warhound Titan. Massive kit, massive build. At the time anyway, I've since gone on and done some others, but from a technical perspective, I thought the Warhound was pretty challenging. An awful lot of pistons that need to be cut, the posing, you have to think about weight distribution, considering that it's quite top heavy. You need to think about the positioning of the legs, and then assembling those legs, pinning, basing, all kinds of elements that go into a typical Forge World large model build have to be really carefully thought about. It's all well and good having them all up on one leg and everything, but then you've got to think of stability, transport, magnetising, weapon options, all of that stuff that comes with that kind of kit. I mean, it's got four different weapon options on the arms, so trying to work out how best to magnetise those, especially if you've only got sort of some single pieces that you need to be able to reuse between weapons. So working out how to do that. And as I said, there's countless numbers of pistons. I mean, per toe, there were 3 pistons just on each of the toes. So thinking about how the feet were positioned would flex the toes, which meant you needed to cut almost every piston individually, and then paint those pistons to make sure they look sort of suitably oily and grimy. And just from a model perspective, highly challenging. And I found it more challenging than doing the Reaver Titan. I found it more challenging than a Revenant Titan. Maybe not so much against a Phantom, that's a slightly different build. But from a technical perspective, definitely the Warhound Titan for me so far. So the next question comes from Wargaming Wizard, and his simple question is, what got me into the hobby? As far back as I can remember, I must have been early teenage years, I think. Obviously still living with my parents, going to school, and there were some new kids that moved in down my road. And they'd moved from Norfolk or Norwich or somewhere sort of up in the Suffolk region. They'd moved in, they were sort of new kids. There was 3 of them in the family, I seem to remember. And just one day, when we'd all become friends, and there was a few of us that lived on the street, and I'd gone round to their house, and they pulled out the original game of Blood Bowl. And from then on, I was kind of hooked. So there was a little shop up in the back end of Leicester Square, Piccadilly somewhere, called Orc's Nest. The Orc's Nest. I think it might even still be there. I'm not really sure, but it was a real sort of hole of a shop, really. But it had Games Workshop stuff in it. I'd never heard of it before. I'd never seen it before. But playing that game of Blood Bowl, and then heading down to that shop because I wanted to get a team of my own. And then suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I think I saw the RTB01 series, and I think I saw one of the very first editions of a Predator tank and a Rhino tank, and that was it. I wanted Space Marines, just like most teenage kids these days. You want Space Marines, you want powered armoured giants to roam around the battlefield, and then that got me into some early epic type stuff as well, because you could play with big battles, and that's where I learned about Titans. But I was still sort of playing a little bit of Blood Bowl. We weren't really taking it overly seriously, but that was the models, that was it, that was the brand, and that's what got me into it. So Dunford's Tim Bob says, congratulations on my success and my 100 subscribers, thank you very much indeed. And he asks, how will Thousand Suns play in 8th edition? And that's a good question. I haven't had a game with my army yet. I'm looking forward to doing so very much once they're painted. I'm very much more of a, if I've not painted it, I won't use it type of person, rather than proxying or anything like that. How will they play? From what I've read so far, Sorcerers kicking out mortal wounds is going to be a big thing for the way they play, and their increased saves for low-powered, non-armor penetrating modelled weapons gives their Rubric Marines a really good save, their Terminators are really good saves, and Magnus is just a complete beast. And I think they will play very strong overall. I'm not sure how well they'll hold up against a Horde army though, because of their really high power level and quite high points. I think they could get swarmed quite easily by Tyranids, possibly by Necrons if they're running a Necron Warrior Horde list as well, because they just keep getting back up. And certainly by Orcs running large mobs of boys. If they get into combat, I think just the sheer volume will overwhelm them. But from a general perspective, I think they'll do pretty good. I don't think they'll be top tier by any stretch of the imagination. But I think they should go toe to toe with most armies if you build the list right. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how they play. As I said, I haven't had a game with them yet, but once I do, you'll be the first to know. Underdog Painting says, congratulations on 100 subs, you sexy bugger. No, you're the sexy bugger. I'm just old, average and British. But thank you very much anyway. And he'd like to know what's my favourite aspect of the hobby. Is it painting, gaming or whatever? For a long time, when I first started, it was purely painting. I don't think I really played a game until, well, a proper game, until maybe 4th edition. So although I collected through Rogue Trader, 2nd and 3rd, probably my first game was around 4th edition. I had a Death Guard army, I had my Space Wolves, and I think that was probably all I had at the time. I didn't have much disposable income. I was renting in Tunbridge Wells, it was very expensive. I had quite a low paid job. So yeah, I didn't have a huge amount of cash. But yeah, back then it was definitely just painting. I've moved on into gaming for a long time. I do enjoy the technical aspect, the challenge, and playing the game still with painted models. I guess going back to painting has been quite an important part of the hobby for me, making sure that my armies are painted to the best that I could possibly do them, and then painting to a deadline. So I've been big on campaign events. So often painting, you know, when you've got a campaign event coming up, it's normally sort of maybe 4 or 5 months notice. Got your tickets booked, got the hotel booked, so you've already committed to, you know, a couple £100 worth of commitment just in attending a weekend, and then making sure that your army's up to spec. You've at least had a few games with it under your belt, so you know how it plays, rehearsed all the rules and everything else, and tried to work out how you're going to play the game against the various different types of mission. Because campaigns, you see the campaign pack, which will indicate the types of missions that you're going to play, any bonus special rules and so on. And then yeah, just building and painting an army, or improving an army, or adding to an existing army, just to go and play on those campaigns. Never been to a tournament. I suppose that's not quite true. There used to be a conflict event which used to be held in Edinburgh, Birmingham, London, and I think somewhere else as well. And I attended a London conflict that was held at Alexandra Palace a long time ago, and it was a doubles event. I think I took a Warwalker scatter armour army with a Farseer for guide, and then a friend of mine who's actually commented on this video, he's coming up shortly, Gareth Etherington, and I think he took some Fire Warriors. So we had a Fire Warrior spam and Scatter Laser spam. I don't think we did particularly well. Fairly sure it was Gareth anyway, but that was a long time ago now. But yeah, definitely more so to the gaming, but making sure that I've got a good army, well, a good painted army to go along with it. So started painting, then gaming, and now it's probably a combination of the two. Noel James is up next, and he says that he loves my Imperial Fists. Thank you very much. I love them too. Another yellow army to go on top of the Iyanden, my Iyanden Alderi, should we call them now, not Eldar, which will be featuring on a video soon, on a showcase once I've got my photo studio all set back up again. He'd like to know what's my favourite unit within my Imperial Fists. Now, Imperial Fists are a pretty generic 40k chapter. There's nothing overly special about them. They did have some special rules to do with taking out fortifications and re-rolling ones with bolt weapons. Not so much at the moment until they get their unique individual codex, or at least part of a codex that may or may not be in a generic Space Marine one. But what's my favourite unit that's always in my army? Land Raider Spartan maybe, and the Storm Eagle, but nothing overly fancy. I'm not taking sort of breachers or anything that's Imperial Fist specific. It's just a Space Marine unit, a Space Marine army. But the Spartan I've had some good moments with. I remember a campaign weekend, someone bought a Storm Raven army, Blood Angels army, and in one of those he had a full load of Death Company, and another one he had Dante with a load of Honour Guard, or Sanguinary Guard even, and another one with a load of Assault Marines without jump packs. And he had all these Storm Ravens all come on the board. I think Storm Raven was a fairly new model at the time. I elected to Skyfire with all those quad las cannons and took out 1,000 points of his army in one round of shooting. I was exceptionally lucky. The poor guy just lost the will to live. I did go and buy him a beer, as it was complete luck. You know, I was hitting the sixes to hit. They were twin links, so I was re-rolling. And then getting the penetration, watching them either crash and burn or whatever. And then all the models inside, I think they suffered, was it a Strength 9 AP2 hit? So I think the only model to walk away from all of that was one Assault Marine and Dante. Yeah, that seems to ring a bell. And then they got a last cannon in the face from tactical squads, and that killed him off. And that was something like turn 2 or turn 3. Yeah, and he was not best pleased. But that's what happens when you put your eggs in one basket. But that's probably why the Spartan is my favourite unit. It was a comedy moment. As I said, I did buy him a drink, but it was more luck than anything else to deal with it. So yeah, that's probably the best answer for that question. Idic Beer asks, what's my favourite and least favourite army? Favourite army historically, probably going to go back to the Space Wolves again. I love the background of them, the Space Vikings, with a little twist, with the Canis Helix, turning them into deranged monsters. I love the background during the Heresy, where pretty much the Space Wolves were charged by the Emperor himself to watch over potential dodgy Primarchs and be almost like an assassin kill squad. And they kind of lingered and lurked with various different legions at the time, looking for any signs of heresy, looking for any dodginess going on, and be ready to execute at the Emperor's will. But yeah, the models are good, the iconography is good, the background is really good. Lehman Russ is just a beast. He was just one of my favourite to read about. Obviously the Prospero invasion, when Magnus all went a bit loony and Ahriman was sort of mustering his forces, and they all messing around with their nasty powers that had been banned at the Edict of Nicaea. And the Space Wolves turned up with a whole load of Legia Custodes and a load of Sisters of Silence to nullify those powers. Great storyline of them going through the streets of Prospero, all sort of led by a Custodes and a Sister to sort of null space and block those powers from the Thousand Suns. So yeah, that's probably my favourite army. Least favourite, from a background perspective, I think Necrons are a little bit boring. I know you're a Necron player. I think they are a little bit weak on background. They have been around forever, in their underground tombs and everything else. But I don't think Games Workshop have developed the narrative and lore enough on those guys to give them a better sense of depth. They're just sort of metallic robot killing dudes. But if you go back really into the history, with the way they sort of transposed their brains almost into the robots, but only sort of the characters have sort of maintained any autonomy, as it were, and any memories of that. So I find them a little bit bland. They're a little bit bland, and probably another army that I'm not so keen on. Dark Elder a little bit. I've never been a fan of the really fragile nature of the models. They're very slim, they're very thin. They do tend to break a lot. I don't know how many people have broken all their Raiders and Ravagers in transport with all those sails and sticky out bits and trophy racks and so on that are stuck all over them. Not so much their background I don't like, I just don't like the fact that no one really thought about transporting the models, which is quite a practical element of the game, as most of the time you're travelling somewhere to go and actually play the game. And so that's probably it. So from a background perspective, probably Necrons I find a bit thin, and from a practical perspective, probably the Dark Elder. Kevin Uwe, I hope I've pronounced that right, has asked, what's my most winning army? What's the army that's probably had the most success? Difficult one to answer. I've played a lot of games with a lot of armies and had mixed success. I've played an all-night army that didn't do particularly well. Imperial Fists I've played a lot of. I've played with Necrons, I've played with Eldar, I've played whatever the army I've got, I've always played games with them. Probably the most success though has probably come from Eldar, and I haven't run a kind of Taldar or Eldar hybrid. It's always been pure Eand and Eldar, either infantry spam or vehicle spam, or just a combination of all of them. What do they call it, the Davu unit, the Dire Avenger vehicle unit, running out and firing off all their shots from their assault weapons. That was always a good unit. Adding sort of some Forge World elements to that army. It's probably the most successful army I've ever had. Everything else probably rounds out about 50-50, to be honest. But then again, I'm not taking optimum builds as what people say. I've never fielded a Death Star unit. I've never fielded Screamer Stars or any of that kind of shenanigans that's gone on for a couple of editions now. I've got a painted army, I'll play that army. If I have success with it, that's great. If there's a unit in there that's terrible, then I might not use it again. Howling Banshees scream to mind at them. In 7th edition they were terrible. But Warp Spiders, I loved using Warp Spiders in that army. They were just great, really fast unit. Kicked out, strength 6, AP rubbish, but strength 6 shots by the bucket load. Could appear anywhere on the battlefield and then sort of teleport jump all over the place. Really powerful unit, I thought. yeah, so probably the most successful has been the Elder. So Hendrik Elvering has asked what inspired me to start the Imperial Fists. Now I think I covered that a little bit ago. It was down to a campaign weekend. I think a bunch of us had taken Imperial Fists actually, but this was back up at Maelstrom Games. If anyone remembers Maelstrom Games up in just outside of Nottingham, they're no longer with us for various dubious reasons. But there was a campaign weekend up there, and there was a reason that I took Imperial Fist that does elude me right now, but I think at least 2 or 3 of us had done an Imperial Fist army. I wanted to sort of do it was a Heresy era gaming setting run by the Tempest Fugitives, who have also disbanded, but I was part of that organisation for a while, and we did some Heresy era stuff long before Forge World did. So we were using some third-party modelling parts to build those armies. So I was doing Cataphract armies, I was doing Heresy era jump pack looking armies that were not using Forge World or Games Workshop parts because they just didn't exist. So it encouraged a bit of conversion and a bit of work around that. And that was probably the reason that I started Imperial Fist. Yeah, campaign, pre-Heresy, good setting. We had some characters that we set up that are now in Forge World books, interestingly enough, with very similar looking rules. So I'd made those characters, and we'd had some buffs in those characters that offered some synergy to the army, and that's what encouraged me to play them. It was a Heresy era. I liked a bit of yellow. I wanted a different yellow to the Iyanden Eldar that I'd already painted, and I wanted a new Marine army that wasn't Space Wolves. So the next question is from Gareth Etherington. I did mention him before about a Conflict to London event, and he asked, what do I dislike most about the hobby? I think there's only one answer for that, and that is cleaning up the models before you paint them. It's a bane of my life. It takes forever to do it properly. I have in front of me, I'm going to show the camera here, that little pile of filings and shavings and clippings and so on is purely from the Dark Imperium box set that I've just assembled. Cleaning up models is a pain in the arse. It's a necessary evil to make sure you get a good paint finish, but just takes forever. I mean, it's taken me 2 evenings, maybe a total of 5 hours on Sunday and a couple of hours on the Friday, just to build 50 models. So pushing, clipping from the frames and then cleaning them all up and then gluing them has probably taken me 10 hours to make 50 models. That's a long time. 10 hours is a long time just cleaning stuff up. And when you move into Forge World, it's even worse. Now I remember weighing the excess cuttings from the Reaver Titan, and it came in at 2 kilos of offcut. 2 kilos of resin offcut. All the little gates, all the triangles, all the smoothing, all the filing that needs to be done to clean those models up from the manufacturing process. And I think going back to even the Phantom Titan, it took me probably a month just to prepare the model, prepare and assemble the model, and then a month to paint it. So a month's time just to get the model ready, and I was working purely on that thing, nothing else. I was just getting that ready, and that is the thing that annoys me most about the hobby. So Alex O asks about kit bashing. How do I feel about it, going from proxy all the way up to a model? I said earlier in this video, I don't think I've ever run a proxy. It's either been fully WYSIWYG or it's just not run at all. So I've never run a Coke can monolith army. I've never run anything that's not what it should be. Even down to weapons. If it's got a melter gun, it's got a melter gun. If it's got a flamer. No hidden power fists that look like something else. It's always been what it should be. As for kit bashing, I used to do a lot of conversions. My Space Wolf army is an entirely bareheaded army, not a single helmeted marine in that army at all. Lots of head conversions, borrowed heads, Mordheim heads, obviously Space Wolf heads, bear heads from everywhere, sculpted fur, sculpted hair, converted kneeling marines, standing marines, at ease marines, different poses. And I find that once you've got a certain army, that's fine at a combat patrol level where people are looking at very small models or a small collection of models, but when you get to a bigger army, that kind of detail just gets lost in the volume. And so for a long time now, I've very little conversion work. Here and there I might do a little tweak, I might do a weapon mod or a weapon swap or a head swap, but not so much cut and shut legs or modify arms. I've done a few little bits here and there if the models look too similar, but in the most cases I just don't bother anymore. Space Wolves, as I said, fairly heavily converted, all the Terminators, Space Marines, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it just gets, when you get to a certain size army, that level of coolness does get a little bit lost. Unless it's, I mean, I've seen a really fantastically converted demon army that just looks amazing. It's on super graphic bases and it does look really cool. But from an average playing perspective, I concentrate more on the paint job than I do on the conversion job. And for me, yeah, it's more about the painting. The conversions just come along here and there, but I just find it gets a little bit lost these days, unless you're some kind of super sculptor and you can do wonderful things with green stuff, and I don't have that skill. I don't possess that skill. I don't have the time to learn that skill, unfortunately. So yeah, just minor conversions now, but more about the painting, and I just want to get the model together and get the paint on, and then get gaming with them. Atomic Dog Scale Model Freak said, "What got me into the hobby? What model got me into the hobby, or what game got me into the hobby?" Similar kind of answer to what got me into the hobby earlier, really. So I'll just recap on that. Some friends moved into my road. We became friends. They had Blood Bowl. Went to the shop where they got Blood Bowl. They had Space Marines, and that is how the story goes. So the game that got me into it was Blood Bowl. The shop that got me into it was Orc's Nest, and then Space Marines from then on. And then obviously once I got into the hobby and got into the depth and the lore and the background, I then branched into Orcs and Tyranids and pretty much every other race that's gone as well. The only army I think I've never owned is Dark Elder. Fairly sure that is the only army I've never owned. Space Marines, pretty much every faction, all the way up to Mechanicum and Skitarii now. Owned all of those at various different stages of construction, but Dark Elder I think is the only one I've never done. But yeah, that's just a recap of that question. Andy Morecambe has said I've inspired him to start a new Thousand Sons army, and will I be starting a new army for 8th edition? Yes and no. A new army, yes, if you want to include the Primaris, Space Marines and the Death Guard. Will they be a full army, or will they just be additions? Death Guard I might just paint as a painting challenge just to look quite cool, and maybe mix into a generic hybrid Black Legion kind of list. Primaris I'm going to add to my Imperial Fists, and so they're kind of a new faction, but they're not. So I'm definitely going to be doing those. As to a dedicated brand new 8th edition army, I'd only just recently started the Thousand Sons myself, so that was before all the announcements of 8th edition, so I'll be continuing that build into 8th, and I have a number of outstanding projects, a large number of outstanding projects, which my wife's not too happy about. I've got Xiphon fighters, I've got a Titan to do, I've got boxes of Grey Knights to do that I've always wanted to do a Grey Knight army. Could never decide whether I wanted to do a silvery blue one or do a proper grey one. Expansions to the Elder. I've got my Mechanicum to finish, so I've got a number of things that I want to start finishing rather than buying new stuff. I've got a terrible habit of buying new stuff, and then that's new and shiny, I put that together, then there's another new and shiny, that gets put together, and I end up with buckets of stuff that I never finish. I need to make a better effort at finishing what I've got. So, new army for 8th, no. Additions to 8th, yes. Finish what I've got, try to. Promise. Justin Lane asked, will I be playing a Xenos army in 8th edition? Simple answer is yes. I have a nice Elder army that I really like, Eldari army. And I do own a Necron army, even though I said I'm not a big fan of them. Not a fan of the background. Didn't say I was a fan of not using them. Those are my two Xenos armies that I have. I don't own any Tyranids anymore. I sold all those off. I don't own any Orcs anymore. So those are the two factions that I'll be focusing on. I think Eldar are going to be pretty strong this edition. I'm looking forward to giving those a run on the battlefield. Necrons are looking also strong. I think the monolith has some disgusting rules, and just the sheer volume of get back ups and buffs and everything else that can come on, going to give those a run as well. It's not a particularly big army. I think my last count of my Necrons was 2,000 points. I think that's 2,000 painted. I'll get some pictures and feature them on the channel, shall I? That was a quick and dirty paint job on that. It was mainly sort of lots of dry brushing of silvers and everything else, and then I airbrushed all the weapons in with sort of a neon-y orange glow to it, and then all edge highlighted in a blue. They look a little bit Tron-like. But those are the two armies that I'll be playing in 8th at Xenos at this time. Never Ever More Grey asks, what's the first model I remember painting? I have over here, which I did briefly show the other day. This is one that I found. Let me show that up to the camera there. This is a Deathwing model circa 1992, and this is one of my earliest ever models. It is pretty heavy. It's a solid lump of lead. Even says on the base here, I'm not going to show too well on the camera, maybe if it focuses, it says Deathwing on the front. And then you going to focus, camera? No. 1992 it says on the back anyway. It says GW, copyright GW 1992. That's the first one I found that's really old. It's a terrible paint job. Look at the, oh yeah, it's awful. The least said about it, the better. I think I do have some really early edition Orc models as well, ORC, Orc, fantasy models that have glued crossbows and all kinds of stuff to them. I remember painting those in, with the old Goblin green bases and the green flock, as every good 1990s Games Workshop fanatic would have done. Paint the edges in Goblin green, dip in green flock, ta-da, done. So those are probably the earliest I've got. That's definitely the earliest I remember owning at the moment that I found. But yeah, that's the earliest. So Invasive Wargaming asks, how do I find time for the hobby? How does it fit into my schedule? I do have quite a busy job that involves quite a lot of travel. If I am travelling for a particular period of time, I do try and pack in some models and a scalpel, at least do some cleaning up of models. As I said, that's the bane of my life. It takes all the time, but if I'm travelling, stuck in a hotel, ordering some room service, and I'm not taking carry-on luggage only, then I'll take a knife and a scalpel and some glue and maybe start putting some stuff together. I think I put some Thousand Suns together over in a hotel in Frankfurt or Munich or somewhere recently, and some more models in California back in March. But yeah, I do have to travel a lot with work. I have a very understanding wife who doesn't mind me doing this crazy stuff and actively, is that the right word? Sometimes supports it, providing it's kept clean and tidy. She's already asking me for my birthday list next month, what I would like from Games Workshop, which is very nice. Yeah, so how do I fit it in? If I'm not travelling, then I try and get in a couple of hours of personal man time, hobby time, whether that's playing PlayStation or doing some toy soldiers, some painting, and more so now making some videos as I go along. So can be a bit difficult to balance that work-life stuff, especially if I'm having a bad day at work or a long day or I'm away. And obviously when you come back from being away, you need to have some good family time, catch up with what you've missed, sort out your chores, whatever you've got to do around the house. As a married homeowner, there are, you can't just disappear into your man cave and disappear for hours, even though sometimes I might do. But there are things that need to be done in the real world, unfortunately, as well. But it's a fine balance, getting it right, and just keeping the hobby fresh by not burning yourself out doing it too much, and just getting the time in when you can. Broken Brush Gaming asks if I have any hobbies outside of Games Workshop. Yes. I'm a bit of a petrol head. I drive a fast-ish sports car. I'm a keen motorbiker, so I also have a motorbike. It's a Triumph Street Triple RS Special Edition jobby. RX SE even. Triumph Street Triple RX SE. They've just done a new model, so I'm getting confused between the RS and the RX. So the new RX Triumph, which looks awesome, and they keep trying to sell me one of those. But yeah, I like motorbiking, I like driving. I'm a qualified advanced PADI scuba diver, so I'm a bit of a vacation scuba diver. On top of that, I play a lot of PlayStation. I'm a bit of a Call of Duty fanatic, as well as I've been playing Horizon Zero Dawn this year as well. If anyone's played Horizon Zero Dawn, fabulous game. First ever game on any console I've ever done all the trophies and done 100% completion. That's how involved and how addicted I was for 2 or 3 straight weeks playing Horizon Zero Dawn. Fabulous game. Recommend it to anybody. Yeah, so I like a bit of console gaming, scuba diving, motorbiking, driving, a little bit of keep fit as well. I've just, for my sins, I've put on a little bit of weight recently. So I've got a personal trainer that I'm starting up with next month at my local gym, who's going to beast me into oblivion. Hobbies before that, up until 2012, I was a member of Her Majesty's Forces. I was a reservist with the British Army. So I did that for 12 years. Yeah, 12 years. I was a signals detachment commander. I was a corporal in the army, so I was responsible for all kinds of communication stuff. So that was a while ago now. Big into the shooting back then. I haven't picked up a rifle for a long time, but I was captain of the regimental shooting team, and in 2009 I think I was ranked 27 in the entire British Army at shooting. So that was a big hobby. I'd been shooting since I was about 13, through the cadet organisations, through university, and then through the army. But since leaving, I've just not got the time to get down to a range or to go to Bisley or anywhere like that and join a rifle club. I'd love to. My eyes are not as good as they used to be. Only up until 2 years ago I've started wearing glasses, so probably not the best thing for shooting with these days. But yeah, so a number of hobbies. Inquisitor Jones asks, am I more average, more old, or more Brit? Or equal parts? Well, my age starts with a 4, so whether that counts as old, probably for the demographic for this hobby. I know they kind of target sort of the 13 plus market and up to sort of maybe 25-ish. So I'm probably above the average age of most gamers, certainly in the 40k arena. Finding that's changing a little bit. I think there are plenty of gamers out there. I know people that are older than me, and I know a lot more people that are younger than me. So maybe I am more averagely older than the regular gamer, and obviously I'm 100% British, so can't really help that. But I hope that kind of answers the question. Ray Burns asks, what's my favourite memory of Warhammer 40k? Probably, I've got a couple of good memories. So I can't remember his name off the top of my head, that's how good a memory it is, but meeting one of the graphical designers for Forge World, who was it's about 3 or 4 years ago now at a Warhammer Fest. Spent an hour with this guy as he took a photograph composition of real models on a big cityscape thing and showed us how he added anything from weather, rain patterns, removing the bases, adding rocks, adding meteorites in the sky and all the rest of it. Showed a really clever graphical process of how they do that, and that goes into the artwork in the Forge World books. And that was just completely fascinating, seeing digital manipulation of real physical items in a real physical environment, and they're making them almost look like a photograph of a real battle zone. Really impressive stuff. A couple other highlights then. I think I mentioned my Spartan killing 1,000 points of Blood Angels in about 2 turns of shooting, or 1 turn of shooting, having to buy the guy a beer. That was, from a gaming perspective, quite a highlight. Not his highlight, but certainly one of mine. And then a couple of others, meeting some of the big names in Games Workshop's history, so the likes of Jervis Johnson, spending some time with him, and spending some time with the now no longer with us Alan Bligh. Met him a number of times. I've got his autograph in a couple of books. Spending a lot of time talking to him about the early Heresy stuff. I own all the big Heresy volumes that he's written, but getting to meet him and sort of discuss some of the concepts and where all that came from, real big nerdy hobby highlight. As well as a couple of the authors as well. I've met a couple of the authors, Graham McNeil and Andy and Dan Abnett, sorry. Got some autographs of there. So yeah, just general sort of hobby nerdisms in and around this. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, so getting to meet some of those creators and talent behind the whole scenario is pretty good. Brian Shot asks, who's my favourite 40k character? Interesting. I've liked Eldrad from a long time. His interwoven history within the Horus Heresy. His first meeting with the Alpha Legion to swing which way they were going to go in the entire battle. But going back to my first love, the Space Wolves, Logan Grimnar. Just a stunning model back in the day. The early metal with his big axe and his big cape and all the rest of it. Not so sure about him on his little snow sled now, but the early edition Logan Grimnar, his background, fantastic. Loved all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Eldrad from a fluff background, Logan probably from a model perspective. Drofka Neb, hope I've pronounced that right, asks a very similar question. What's my favourite Games Workshop model? Historically, as I just said, Logan Grimnar from a model perspective. Thought the casting of that was brilliant. He was a real good paint job on that. He's been around a couple of editions, well, a couple of iterations of that model now. But yeah, the early metal version of that, fantastic. Probably my favourite model across the range of all time. Now, that's not to say that all the new models are not cool. Like Belisarius Cowl is really good from a modern era. All the Grey Knight kits are really cool. But yeah, just going back to that one iconic model, it's probably Mr. Grimnar. Luke Schoen, who's now my new email buddy because he was the lucky winner of the 100 subscriber giveaway. Well done, Luke. Congratulations. Sorted out your voucher today for you, as you well know. Excuse me. And he asked, what's the best way of painting sort of rusty chains on the new Death Guard model? I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Mig. So Mr. Mig here. And that one there. So that's light and standard rust. I think there's a darker rust. Have I got a darker rust as well? No, not there. But yeah, so starting painting with a regular dark metallic colour. Then if you just sort of dab in sort of almost like a stippling effect of some brass. What other good colours? I'm just looking at my colour palette in front of me. Brass, bronze, copper over a silver base, because obviously chains all start silver at some point normally. And then apply those in sort of a stippling motion, then probably a heavy wash with either Nuln Oil or Agrax Earthshade to sort of tie those colours together, and then apply these rust pigments. And these are kind of, you can either apply these wet or you can sort of stipple them on and then use a pigment adhesive, or even some liquid hairspray I think also works with that. So you get the hairspray, spray it into the cup so it forms a little bit of liquid, and then paint that liquid over it. It almost looks like you put too much of these effects on, but then when it gets the liquid on them, it kind of capillary actions and splits and goes all over the model. And the more random effect it looks, the more realistic it looks. So that's probably the way that I'd go about doing that. If I go with the rusty chain look, which I probably will do, thinking about it now, I'll try and demonstrate that when I get round to painting my own Death Guard. But once again, Luke, congratulations on winning, and thank you for your question. The Johnsonator, he's asking a similar question to earlier. Am I doing a new Army for 8th edition, and what will the centrepiece be? I'll just reiterate and recap from that earlier question. I've got a lot of unfinished projects. I just started a 1,000 Sun army, and I really want to do the 1,000 Suns for 8th edition. It's like my brand new army for it. Centrepiece going to be Magnus or Araman, but Magnus is huge, so he's going to be dominating that centrepiece. So I've got about 30 Rubric Marines, 10 Scarab Occult Terminators, 6 Exalted Sorcerers, Araman on disc, Araman on foot, and Magnus. That's the sort of the starting formation of that army. That's already too many points to ever field in an army, I think. Probably need to add some transports or some other options into that. But yeah, that's going to be my 8th edition new army. So Tabletop War James asks, what weapon would I use in the 40k universe? I think that's where you put it? Yeah. In the 40k universe. I would... Well, that's a difficult one, isn't it? Are we talking bringing it into the real world and having, you know, plasma weapons or whatever? What I think would be really cool is if I could climb into a crisis suit with all the jetpacks and everything else, with the plasmas and the flamer guns. I think that would be really cool if we could have that now, and I could just climb into my little Tau crisis suit. Obviously I've got 2 eyes rather than 1, and I'm not blue, but yeah, if I could climb into a crisis suit and then go jetpacking around with plasma guns. I think that would be really cool. Very much doubt it's ever going to happen. Although we have got jump pack technology now. I seem to remember seeing a film on it the other day. Yeah, they're developing it for military use, but yeah, jump pack, jetpack things are coming along. So maybe we could see real Inceptors or Tower battle suits soon. Maybe not. Johnny Rotten 665 asked, what's the best way to paint a corroded metal effect? I'm going to refer you straight back to the rusty chain effect for the Death Guard. So metals, any of your flavoured metals, hammered copper, brass, chainmail type colour, silvers, stippled in random patterns all over the area you want to do. There's a couple of good ways if you're aware of salt weathering technique. I advise you to Google that. That's quite good. Or the hairspray technique. So you paint all the rusted effect first on a model. So imagine you've got a rhino door or something. You paint that in all those weird metallics. In a random pattern, give it a couple of washes, add these pigments, these wonderful pigments I've still got here, and let that dry. You then spray the whole thing with hairspray and sprinkle salt on it in various little blobs. You then paint the entire panel or model again in the top colour that you actually want. So for example, it's an ultramarines blue. You then paint the ultramarines colour over the top of it, and then where all that salt is, you start picking and flicking that off with a knife or whatever and chipping away the top coat of blue that you've got, and that will reveal underneath it the rust. And because it'll be a random sort of nature, it will look quite realistic, and you can pick away around, you know, door handles and hinges and edges of wear and so on. And then once you're happy with that final state, then give it a purity seal or a varnish, whatever, a matte varnish, and that will give you a rusted underfill to a top coat. But if you want just pure rust, then just go back and re-listen to how I said about those that rusted metallic chain effect, and that will do you as well. And there we go. That's all the questions from Q&A. I think and hope that it's going to be Q&A number 1. I'm sure, I hope, fingers crossed, the channel continues to grow. There'll be another giveaway in X number of subscribers' time, and then I'll open up for more Q&As and more questions. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's been quite engaging to engage with the people that are actually looking at my content. I thank you very much for that engagement. It's really appreciated. Motivates me to do more of this kind of stuff. Yeah, really enjoyed talking to you guys and communicating via chat and stuff. Looking forward to doing a few more live videos. Hope you're looking forward to those as much as I am. They're an interesting challenge on their own from a technology perspective, but getting some engagement with there, and obviously continuing with photo showcases, army showcases, battle reports. I'm looking to do some of those very soon, timetable pending, and then moving on with general hobby content. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and I shall catch you in the next video.